Welcome to Better Sex, where you get the information and inspiration to create and enjoy your best possible sex life. Join your host, sex therapist Jessa Zimmerman, as she brings you expert guests, helpful tips, knowledge, and strategies to improve your intimate relationships. And now, your host, Jessa Zimmerman.
Hey, it's Jessa. Welcome back to the Better Sex Podcast. So glad you're here with me today. If you have not already heard, I have a free on-demand webinar called How to Help Your Partner Want More Sex Without Just Making Them Feel More Pressure. And I'm proud of this. I'm happy about it. I'm talking to higher desire partners, not because I'm on their side, but not because I'm not on their side, but because they're the ones that have to make some changes first. If their partner is going to be welcomed into a process of creating easy intimacy. The webinar is going to talk about the 3 most common mistakes that are probably happening that are keeping you guys stuck. And so this is available for free at intimacywithease.com/training. And it segues kind of nicely into today's topic, which is men as sexual leaders, sexual leadership. Now, I'm talking to G.S. Youngblood, who's written a book about this. And he is pretty specifically talking to men as a gender and often in heterosexual relationships. So, in my podcast, it's not like I'm only talking to heterosexual people or cisgendered people, but this topic specifically, the way he's thinking about this is in that context. So just to call out, it's not as inclusive as some episodes are, although we all have masculine energy and feminine energy. And to varying degrees, this will be relevant even in same-sex relationships or whatever. But the way he talks is heteronormative. But he's talking about men stepping into energy and into specific roles that invite their partners into something, not force them, not coerce them, not pressure them, not, taking over. It's not about control. It's about invitation. And so it kind of sits along that same line as my training. How do we help our partner actually want sex? Now, of course, my webinar is not about cisgendered or heterosexual people. It's not always the men who want more sex. But anyway, the theme here is invitation. So I hope you get a lot out of the episode. It's really, really interesting to think about what he's trying to call people into, to step into, and get out of sort of the nice guy rut that's got some real upsides, but isn't balanced enough. So anyway, hope you enjoy the show. And before we start the show today, it is sponsored by Intimacy with Ease. It's a method to help otherwise happy couples achieve a sex life that is easy and fun for both of them, so that you can actually just enjoy your sex life with zero stress. For more information, if you want to watch a brief little training video that's available, all of that, go to intimacywithease.com. So, Jess, thank you so much for being on the show with me.
It's great to be here, Jessa.
Yeah, so we were just chatting before I hit record. It's pretty cool. I've had a couple different guests on talking about feminine energy, and I am just jazzed to get the other half of this, the masculine side, right?
All right,
and hear
let's do
about this, right?
Mm-hmm.
I guess what I first want to ask you is why are you doing this? Where did this come from? This has not always been your business, right?
Yeah. So my motivation to go into this realm was just born of my personal experience and really failure in the area of relationship in general. Having gone through a divorce way back when, and we all know, anybody that's been through it, how painful that is. And it is those painful experiences that often motivate us to do something in that arena. So for me, it was just a search for how can I be more in my own masculine energy in this relationship? And I was married at the time to a strong woman. My next long-term relationship was with a strong woman. So it called out my A game, to say the least. And so through 12 years of men's work, most of that time in long-term relationship where that which served as my laboratory for what worked, what didn't, what brought us more connection, what shut down the connection, etc. That was where all the principles in the book were born. And so over a period of about 6 years, I just started to write down the dynamics that I would observe, what worked, what didn't, whether I was learning it or experientially experiencing it. And all that came together in the book that we're talking about today.
Okay. I guess it's significant that you were in a relationship with strong women? Like, is it the same principle, strong, or I don't know, I hate to say weak women, but, is it about toning women down or rising up to also be strong? Like, what's the relationship to strong women here?
Well, I'll comment first that the inside joke is that pretty much all women are strong women these days.
Right.
So it's kind of a ha-ha in some ways, but certainly the people that I was attracted to were definitely on that scale of very self-aware of their own worth and very intelligent. And so really not settling for a man that wasn't going to step forward in his own power. And so I think that's what, if we're going to distinguish between quote unquote strong women, there are some more on the end of the spectrum where they're just not going to take anything less than a man in relationship who is on purpose, who's got clarity and decisiveness, who feels solid and grounded and allows them to relax. I mean, that's really what it comes down to is women like that, in my experiences, are drawn to somebody who can help their nervous system relax because they're often on in life because they're doing great things in life. So that was, I think, the reference to strong women, because I asked it, and so many men over the years have asked me, like, how do I be with my woman who's so powerful? It's like I can't keep up sometimes. And so, in this modern world, you've got to have a model of masculinity, or at least that's one that I sought to define, but a model of masculinity that really can exist in this world where there's a lot more equality. So what is that model? And that's what I think I've provided. It's a 3-part blueprint in the book for a way of being that a man can bring to the table where he is in his power, but he's not negating any of her power. And he's able to mesh with both. So it's not about subjugating her, and it's not about subjugating yourself. It's about how can you coexist.
Right. So talk to me a little bit about how men lack this. I mean, where does it come from that this is a struggle or something that needs to be developed? Because I know in my own practice, I only see couples, and if it's a hetero couple, the guy's sort of saying, I've got sisters and mom, I'm trying so hard to be aware and feminist, and it kind of thwarts their power somehow. So I'd love to hear from you, like, what's happened to people that this...
Yeah, I think there's a lot of dynamics. So anything I speak to is just my perspective in that one piece of the puzzle. But look, the pendulum has swung. We've had thousands of years of male domineering and misogyny and exploitation. Like, we all know that. That's just how it was. And the real question is not about looking back and let's self-flagellate about this. It's like, how can we move forward? And so, unfortunately, the pendulum has swung the other way. So men really, they're too afraid to really assert themselves in a lot of ways. And then they grow up just not asserting themselves, and they never know how. They never build those muscles. And their father never teaches them. Even if they had a masculine father, he probably was just that way. He didn't know what he was doing. So he didn't teach it explicitly to his sons. So the pendulum swung the other way. And then it also got harder because women got more capable, more assertive, I'll just leave it at that, more assertive. And so men were just like, oh shit.
Right.
How do I handle this? And so a lot of men are afraid they've never been taught. This book is really about teaching them those skills. And it's not about reasserting control. It is absolutely not about that. It's about bringing your leadership as an invitation rather than a compulsion, and if I invite my woman to follow my lead, if I'm competent enough at it, she may choose to do that. If I'm not, she may choose not to do that. That's just the reality of it. And so it's more of an invitation than about control like it was in the old days.
Right. So not about dominating or taking over, getting your woman in line or something like that, but just being an equal partner.
Yeah. I mean, equal, it's not
equal but different. Right?
Yes, exactly. We can be different energies. Now, in the world, women can be in their masculine energy and in the same workforce that a man is and doing the same things in that realm. But I think what we're talking about here is in the area of intimacy. So in the area of intimacy, you don't necessarily want two people in their masculine energy. And that's the point here. So you create what, David Data, who's the kind of the prominent voice in the space, referred to as polarity, even though that concept goes back thousands of years, Shakti and Shiva.
Right.
But you want to create that polarity in relationship. And that's a lot about what this book is about.
Yeah. So speak to me a little bit. Again, I've had a couple of guests talk about this, but they've both been women. So, what is feminine versus masculine energy? How do you sort of describe each of those sides of the coin?
Yeah. These are inherently subjective things to describe. And we're also talking about energies, not genders here.
Right.
But the masculine energy is directed. It's penetrative. It is characterized by clarity, by groundedness, and by a creation of safety for those that are under the masculine's charge. I would describe the feminine as more receptive, softer, more interested not so much in the directionality as the connection between the two of us, the light, and the joy in things. And, somebody said, I forgot who, it might have been Data. Life for a lot of men, life would be really gray and dull without a feminine being in his life. It's like it adds the color to our life. Otherwise, it would just be all like toil and struggle for us, because that's kind of how we're wired. We want to get things done and get the next thing done and the next thing done in that masculine energy. So I know those were pretty poetic descriptions of the masculine and feminine, but that's the best way I would describe those energies.
Yeah. And I do want to remind, you said this, but I just want to remind the listeners, we are not talking about men and women, right? All people have masculine and feminine energy, right? Like I know that people listen and could get tripped up. But wait, you're saying men are all like this and women are like that? It's like, no.
Yeah, and everybody chooses what they want to inhabit.
Right.
And so for me, my audience, and the pronouns I'll use, but in the book I'm very clear, just generalize the pronouns however you want. I will use he, she pronouns for masculine, feminine, but that's the frame I'm looking through. That's the people I'm talking to. Anybody can take these learnings and just generalize into whatever gender, sexual orientation you've got. Doesn't really matter. It's energy.
All right. So what do you mean by masculine leadership? I mean, I'm already getting some idea. And then what are these three parts of this masculine blueprint? I don't want to give the entire book away. People should get it, right? But give us an introduction into what these are.
Masculine leadership, you can boil it down to one phrase that I try to teach men over and over. You may or may not be the problem, but you are the solution. And what I mean by that, let's just say that there's a couple and they have a fight. An absence of masculine leadership is characteristic of what actually most men do, which is, they get upset. Maybe they get a little hurt by something she says. They shut down and they kind of withdraw and they kind of wait for the whole thing to blow over. And often it does. And, 2 days later, things are fine. I've experienced that. I've had so many of my clients tell me that that's how they handle things. But even though 2 or 3 days later, things are fine again, there's scar tissue that's been laid down. And when you get years and years of that, that's when the ship starts to burst at the seams. Masculine leadership would be very different. The man says to himself, okay, there's a rift here. I'm going to take responsibility for bringing us back together. Right? I mean, it doesn't matter if I caused it or she caused it. Because a lot of men will blame, it's like she's just being crazy, so I'm just going to let her work this out, and that's just blame. Masculine leadership would look like, okay, I am not going to tolerate us just sort of drifting off into our corners and letting that scar tissue lay down. I'm going to lead us to a better place, and it could be, you know what, baby, time out. We are obviously not communicating right now. We're both worked up. We're going to take a 15-minute break. I'm going to go walk around the block, and I'll be back in 15 minutes. And let's continue this thing because I think we'll be in a much better state. Are you okay with that? So you notice what he did. He took it upon himself to lead the couple out of this sort of dysfunction they're temporarily in. So that's part two of the element two of the
okay.
Which is set direction. So it has to do with creating structure and direction.
Okay.
And he also created some safety in there because he wasn't just like, stop, I'll be back in 15 minutes.
Right.
Because that's sort of domineering. That's not going to make her feel safe. She's going to be like, whoa, wait a minute. You just steamrolled me. Yeah. So by asking, how does that land for you? Or how's that for you? He's including her. So he's got directionality, but he's also including her in that, making sure that this works for her. And then they come back in 15 minutes. And most of us will settle in by taking a little break. And now that the couple is now more able to tackle whatever they were fighting about. And that was his leadership that brought them to a better place, that allowed them to better handle this. So that's just one example of what masculine leadership is.
Yeah. So given that, I mean, maybe I've just tripped up on the pronouns, but if it's a heterosexual couple, is this somehow better done by the man, or can't the female partner also exhibit that masculine leadership? Like, isn't that a healing thing to do either way? Is it just important that each one they're taking different roles, or is it better if,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean. And of course we have to fall back, I don't want to say it, but into a little bit of stereotypes where a feminine being is going to be in more of an emotional state. She's not in a factual state. She's not seeing necessarily the bigger picture. She's fully in the experience of the emotion of the moment. And that's great, because that can come out in ways of joy. Like, for instance, in relationships that I would be in, people that I date, I actually want her to be fully in her emotional experience, whether it's good or bad, in that moment, because I enjoy that energy. So it's really I'm putting the onus on the man to take the bigger picture, to step back. Whereas if you're fully in your emotional experience, that's going to be pretty hard. Now, having said that, should somebody on the other side, should she do her own work so that she can, still pop herself out of her own emotions and heal her childhood wounds and all that? Yeah, but that's not our responsibility. Mm-hmm. That's not something that I'm wanting the men to bank on or point to, like, go fix your problem. I'm encouraging the men to take the responsibility on themselves, because I'm speaking to men. So I really want to put the responsibility on them. Can women do that? Absolutely. Should they? Yeah, if they can.
Yeah.
But remember, I'm choosing to talk to a male audience because I think we need the most development. And so that's where I put the responsibility on the men.
Yeah. Okay. Hey everybody, it's Jessa, and we're just taking a little break in the show so I can share something exciting with you. At least I think it's exciting. I wrote a book called Sex Without Stress, and I had turned it into an online course, and now I've reformatted it so that you can sign up at any time. It's more like an a la carte thing. For less than $100, you and your partner can work through this entire process, guided through webinars and assignments and conversations to have and real-world exercises to use to take the stress out of your sex life. So if you're in a good relationship but sex is the issue, this could be a perfect fit. And then separate from that, you can opt into my membership group, month at a time, or you can sign up for a whole year. That's where you'll get the personal support while you're working through the process. So it comes with Q&A sessions, bonus content, some guest presenters, and a private support community, like a forum. So that's priced separately so you can just participate in that when it's useful to you. Anyway, if you want to learn more, go to sexwithoutstress.com. And now back to the show. So how does this play out in sex? I mean, I'm sure it does big time, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
How is this related to what goes on in the bedroom?
Yeah, so sexual leadership is the phrase that I really point to all the time. And this is chapter 13 in the book. So sexual leadership really just says, look, men, stop. Men, ye who are complaining about not getting enough sex, which is pretty much every man I know, stop complaining. Stop waiting for her to feel sexual and actually lead her into her own turn on, into her own pleasure. You can do this. You can actually create conditions that make it more likely that she'll naturally open up. Now, you can't compel her. You absolutely cannot. That's illegal.
Right.
And it leads to all kinds of bad behavior, but you can actually lead her there. And so in the book, I go through, a number of different elements of how I do that. And what I talk about is there's the chapter is divided into two sections. One is how to create the container in which she can open and her sexuality can sort of open up and even go into, her own wildness if you can create this container. And so the container is timing, environment, heart, presence, praise, owning your sexuality, edginess, and attunement. And these are the elements of this container that a man can create that's going to make it way more conducive for his woman to start to go into her sexual body. And if you want, I can spend a moment or two on each of those.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, well, timing can mean a lot of things. You just need to be the master of time. So, for instance, I once had a lover who sex in the morning was actually difficult for her, not physically, but just she always was worried about a client or the plumber coming up, and just all these things. And so I was actually a morning person, so it didn't make a great match in that regard. So what I would do is just say, okay, baby, I'm setting the timer for 30 minutes, and that's going to take us to 8:30. When that timer goes off, we'll get out of bed. And so she would just absolutely relax when I would do that, because I was mastering time. She didn't have to worry about time. So once I took that off her plate and she knew I had it handled with the timer, she was able to relax. So that's one way to do it. So set the time container, set the environmental container, get the heat, the temperature, the lighting, pick up the room, make it look beautiful, because feminine beings tend to be more attuned to the beauty around them. If the room is a complete mess, she's going to have a harder time going into her sexual body. The third one is heart connection. If you don't have a heart connection, pretty much 98% of the women that I know generally aren't going to be at their optimal capacity for sexual openness. And so establishing a heart connection, and I won't go through what that means, but there's a lot there.
Yeah.
Presence, your presence, not being distracted by, oh, baby, let me just check my phone real quick.
Right.
It's going to be
what's the score in the football game?
Yeah, but even if it's just like, oh, there was something important at work, I just want to, it's not going to feel good to her. So that's just one small example of being totally present, as you move into that area of sexuality. Praise, the feminine, I'm just going to say the feminine loves praise. And I think even particularly as we all get older, I think this becomes even more important, of being able to find the beauty in your woman, no matter what age you are. And praise tends to have a sort of an uplifting effect. Owning your sexuality is really about getting in touch with your shame. If you're a little weird about sexuality, like she's going to feel the weirdness, is going to get weird herself. And so there's you can develop a bit of a shamelessness about sexuality. Not anything that's inappropriate, but it's you can really obliterate your shame going through a certain process. And I talk a little bit about that in the book.
Yeah.
Edginess. Sex that's always safe isn't always the most interesting sex. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. And so really, men, how can you bring a little bit of edge to your sexuality? And so I go throughout the book, and I'll go through it in a few minutes, but throughout the book, I talk about different ways to bring edginess into the sexuality. I'll give one tip here is, men, don't smile a lot in sex. In fact, try not to smile much at all. A lot of men, they kind of try to be that nice guy in sex, which is a lot of guys' problem, in life, let alone in the sexual arena. And so when you're smiling a lot, she's kind of like, wow, is he trying to make me feel safe? Because this feels a little off. And then finally, attunement. You as a man have to be really attuned to your woman. So you have to have, half your attention on your own pleasure, but half of your attention on her. Are you watching, if you touch her in a certain way, do her eyes roll back in her head, or does she wince a little bit or kind of furrow her brow? You actually have to notice those things and be attuned to her body, because if you're not, she's going to stop feeling safe and she's going to start to shut down again, because she knows that you're not attuned to your body. Okay.
So I think we live, and part of this is from those other interviews I've done, we live in a pretty masculine energy world, right? And an awful lot of women are kind of in their masculine instead of their feminine. So present company excluded, I'm sure.
Of course.
So how do you help the woman in this equation, again, if it's a hetero couple, move into her feminine?
Yeah,
I mean, because the way you're talking is sort of like feminine beings are just like this, but I actually think a lot of women aren't like that naturally, or they've lost that or something. Is it just by stepping into your masculine that then creates that for them, or what's...
Yeah, this is a great question. I'm glad you asked it. So yes, a man who is in his masculine energy, and that's, if you want to define it the way I define it, he's grounded. So that's 1. 2 is he's providing direction and structure. And 3 is he's creating safety. That's my blueprint for the masculine energy. If a man is bringing that energy, he can often polarize his woman into her feminine, because she feels him grounded. She feels that he's got things handled, and now she can relax back into her feminine. But you're absolutely correct. Even a woman with a great feminine essence, if she's at work all day long, she's just going to be in that masculine energy when she gets home. So I tell the men, the easiest way is to run a bath for her and just banish her to the bathroom, for the bath. But another way is to create some consciousness around it, of letting her know, baby, I would love to get in bed tonight and spend some time together in bed. At 8:00, can we plan to do that? and you set some intentionality so she knows she can get herself ready, whatever that means. When you're as you start the sort of the sensuality, sexuality, getting her into her body is one thing that a man really should do. And so saying, lay down, baby, I'm going to give you a foot rub, where he just takes the lead a little bit. It's like, lay down, I'm going to give you a foot rub. So it's not like he just grabs her and starts kissing her and was waiting for the sexuality to arise. He doesn't even go there yet. He just says, lay down, baby, I'm going to rub your feet or your back or whatever she likes having rubbed. Yeah. And do something physical, sensual, to slowly bring her into her body. And in the book, I talk about all kinds of techniques that you can use to bring her back into her body. So that's really what I recommend to men is, again, take the lead and transition her, from that masculine head space into that more body heart space. And men, you can absolutely do this.
So that leads into my next question, because I'm imagining, all these couples I work with, and some of them, the women are so in their masculine, and the men are not necessarily the higher desired partner, don't necessarily have confidence in general, but certainly sexually, and the idea of sexual leadership is just like, oh, what? Like how do they get there from where they're starting?
Well, I want to say this to every man listening. You can do this. I don't care where you're starting from, unless, there's some other factors at play. But for 98% of the guys out there, you can do this. You can become a lover that leads. So I want to throw that out there as a confidence builder, because it's true. Number one, you tap into resources that are out there, not porn, but there's tons of resources on sexuality out there that are very healthy. And you start to normalize it in your mind. Sex doesn't become this taboo thing that because you learn that as a 7th grader as you're trying to sneak the issue of Playboy. It's something that is out in the open, and you can actually obliterate your sexual shame by just tapping into healthy resources that show healthy outlets of sexuality and techniques, ways to do things. So that's the first thing. So know what you're doing is really, where it all starts.
Yeah.
Number two, you have to be grounded in sexuality. Your woman wants to know that you've got it handled. And part of that is having a very grounded nervous system. And so in the book, I have a whole chapter on embodiment exercises that you would do. And it's all part of the first element of the blueprint, which is respond versus react. So you've got to become more of a grounded, settled man before you can lead. So become grounded, educate yourself on how to develop the skills in sexuality. And then, I know this will sound a little easier said than done, but then proceed boldly. Proceed and try things, but don't be afraid for her to say, oh, I don't like that, or ouch, that hurt. That's not the end of the world. It's not a rejection on you. And just continue to experiment and check in with her. Baby, how does that feel? And so if you're learning oral sex for the first time, it's okay to check in with her and say, how does that feel? Now, you don't want to do that too much, because then it becomes a different energy. But it's okay to check in once in a while and start to experiment. Or you could even set up with her, you could call it a workshop and be like, baby, I want to get better at oral sex. And maybe I haven't had a lot of practice in my life. And so can we just, take 20 minutes where I'm just literally going to experiment? It's going to be a little constructed, but can we do that? And just be very conscious about what you're doing and that you're wanting some practice. I mean, those are all ways I think men can become better lovers.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to ask you probably the question that must come up a lot. What about this whole term toxic masculinity? Mm-hmm. What do you make of that? In some ways you're talking about how masculinity used to be dominating and misogynistic, but
okay.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, let me map toxic masculinity into the blueprint. So I want to repeat the blueprint. Element 1 is respond versus react. So that's becoming grounded. Element 2 is provide structure. So that's setting direction and structure. Element 3 is create safety, which is creating emotional and physical safety for your woman. So we have 2 poles, and in the middle is what I'm trying to teach. So in one is the alpha male, toxic masculinity, misogyny. So that's the guy that's way over identified with element 2, which is set direction, because that's all he's focused on. And it's like he's trying to control everyone and compel and domineer. And so he over indexes on that, and he's not doing anything to create safety. In fact, he's creating a lot of non-safety.
Right.
Now, you might ask yourself, why is it that sometimes it seems like those like alpha dogs, assholes, are with beautiful women. I mean, how many guys have looked across the bar and be like, why is that woman with that guy? He is such he's such an asshole. And the reason is because there are a lot of women who will put up with a lot to be with a man who lives by his own code. So there's a certain attractiveness to that. But unfortunately, it gets really old really fast because he's not caring for her heart at all or her as a person at all. And so it can get old really fast. So that's the toxic masculinity where they're just so focused on like, okay, I'm the alpha and I'm in charge here. And they over-index on that.
Yeah.
I do want to contrast that with the nice guy because that's really starting to become the bigger problem for men is they've all become nice guys. And nice guys want to please because they're very scared not to please. And they're over-indexing on element 3, which is create safety. Like they're wanting to be so safe that they're not attractive anymore and women aren't attracted to them. And so that's why it's that balance of all 3 elements that really creates the healthy model of masculinity that I'm trying to teach here.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously there's your book available. How else do you support people in this work? What else, how else can they work with you or find out more? Or what's available to people that might want to, who are intrigued listening to this? Yeah,
the first step is to go to my website and just check out who I am and some of the things that I talk about. You get on my mailing list, so you get announcements about new content that's coming out or new offerings. I've got one-on-one coaching. I'm just rolling out group coaching for people that maybe can't afford the one-on-one but still want to participate in the work. And then later this year, I'll have a men's group out. I'm also about to put up a waiting list for my what's called dark energy workshop. So I'd be remiss if I didn't say something about dark energy.
Okay.
It sounds a little ominous to some people, like, what do you mean by dark energy? But my consistent experience of women that I know that we talk about these, or even my own relationships, women are attracted to a man that's got both light and dark energy. So he's got that, the light energy is he's got heart and depth and care. So that's all the light energy. The dark energy is, it's that warrior. It's that the lover who's dominant, not domineering. That's very different.
Right.
But he's got a bit of that dominant energy where he is going to take over consensually, of course. I mean, that's a given. But by themselves, each one is challenging. I mean, all dark is kind of like that alpha male where it goes into domineering and abuse. It can go into abuse. Yeah. Whereas if it's all light, it becomes the nice guy that you're just not attracted to. And so consistently women say what they love, what keeps them interested and attracted is that combination of light and dark. So most guys have the light energy, not too bad. And it's the dark energy that a lot of guys I know. And so I have put together a workshop that we work on both of these energies. And so just get on the mailing list and that's where you can see it. And then Instagram, GS Youngblood MIR, and Facebook, GS Youngblood 1. And then on Facebook, the Masculine in Relationship Discussion Group. It's a closed group that, we just discuss relationship issues. Those are the main ways to get in touch.
Okay. I'll put all those links in the show notes too. So people are not trying to write this down while they're driving or whatever they're doing. So, well, great. Thank you so much for being on the show and talking about this. Really interesting.
That was a lot of fun. It's one of my favorite topics and really appreciate you having me on.
You've been listening to Better Sex. Please visit our website, bettersexpodcast.com, for show notes and additional episodes.
And that's a wrap for today. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. If you are enjoying the podcast, if some of this material resonates with you and you would like to make a difference and make sure that this keeps coming out in the world once a week, ongoing, there are a couple things you could do to show your appreciation. The first would be to go to iTunes and rate and review the show. That really helps us be found by new listeners when you review the show on iTunes. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/iTunes. The other thing I want to invite you to consider is becoming a Patreon. For a small monthly pledge, you get some benefits. So for $2 a month, you get advance access to every single episode. For $5 a month, you get a chapter of my upcoming new book. And for $10 a month, I host quarterly get to know you and question and answer chats over the web, and you get invited to that. I would love to have your membership in that, become part of the Better Sex family. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/Patreon, which is Patreon. Again, thanks for listening. I'm glad you're here. Feel free to comment, ask questions, get in touch. I'd love to hear from listeners. Thanks.